superhero.
What can be said about September 11, 2001 that hasn't already been said? Like the Kennedy assassination, the moon landing, or the Challenger explosion, people will always remember where they were that day and the shock and grief they experienced as the first horrible reports and images started rolling in. The raw numbers are staggering in their awfulness: almost 3,000 dead Americans, over 9,000 wounded. That's more casualties than D-Day and almost as many as the entire American Revolution. Sure, America did finally get a measure of revenge with the murder of Osama bin Laden, the militant Islamist responsible for planning the attacks. But America also got a 10-year war in Iraq and an eternal war on terror in the bargain as well. 9/11 is truly a day that will live in infamy in the American psyche forever. Well, if the Oklahoma City bombing was the worst of its time to occur on American soil, the crash of Egypt Air Flight number 990 was the worst to occur in air, although it has never been 100% confirmed. Investigations into the crash, which occurred off Nantucket on October 31, 1999, have almost certainly proven that the co-pilot of the plane caused the crash on purpose. The flight, which had been scheduled from Los Angeles to Cairo, killed all 217 people on board. The National Transportation Safety Board determined that the co-pilot, Emil al-Batouti, had been chanting in Arabic, "I rely on God," a phrase other terrorists have used. He took over the controls of the plane and put it into a dive on purpose. He also struggled with the captain when he returned to the cockpit and realized what Batouti had done. No one will ever know for sure what Batouti intended, but it for sure looks like terrorism. Timothy McVeigh, Terry Nichols, the Alfred P. Moore Federal Building. These are names that will always resonate with all of us. Unfortunately, not in a good way though. On April 19, 1995, the truck bomb that McVeigh and Nichols had constructed exploded outside the building, killing 169 people and wounding almost 700 more. It was the worst attack to ever take place on U.S. soil up until that point. McVeigh was a former U.S. Army soldier and Gulf War veteran who had become radicalized toward the militia movement, a loose conglomeration of groups who hated the U.S. government and all it represented and who thought the feds were trying to take away their rights. He was inspired by the Waco and Ruby Ridge incidents to go into action against the government, hoping to incite a revolt. Of course, when he blew up the federal building in Oklahoma City, he also destroyed or damaged over 300 other buildings in the city that had nothing to do with the government. McVeigh was executed in 2001. Nichols, who helped procure the supplies and build the bomb, was sentenced to life in prison. And back we go to radical Islam. On June 12, 2016, a crazy homegrown terrorist named Omar Mateen decided that he needed to support ISIL and get revenge for the deaths of ISIL soldiers. To that end, he attacked a gay-centric nightclub in Orlando named Pulse. I know, doesn't make much sense, does it? Terror often doesn't. Mateen, who called the Boston Marathon bombers his homeboys, walked into the club during last call and opened fire, killing 49 and wounding 53. During his attack, many witnesses heard him ranting about unjust U.S. practices against ISIL and his desire to get revenge for his country. He was also heard saying the U.S. needed to get out of Syria and Iraq. The police engaged in a standoff firefight for much of the early morning hours until they finally managed to break into the building and gun him down. It seems that if we're not talking about Islamic acts of terrorism, then we must be talking about organized labor ones. A case in point would be the bombing of the Los Angeles Times building on October 21, 1910, a bombing that killed 21 people and wounded 20 more. At the time, the publisher of the Times, Harrison Otis, was seriously anti-union and anti-labor. He had been writing and publishing anti-labor editorials for months. He was also the leader of a local consortium of politically connected businessmen. Otis had a right to be paranoid. Investigators traced the bombing to John McNamara, the treasurer of the local iron workers union. Even McNamara's own lawyer, the famous Clarence Darrow, who gained even more notoriety in the Scopes monkey trial, found out during his own investigation that the union leader was guilty. The defense was able to plead guilty in exchange for commuting the death penalty for McNamara. It's amazing how often labor issues have led to terror acts in our country.
Yeah!